welcome to the 50-Minute Hour. My name's Cory. Today we are joined by Seraphim Calvin and our returning guest, Jonathan. What are we all drinking today?
I've got the coffee.
I've got Robert Mondavi. I'm drinking a Sauv Blanc.
I'm also Robert Mondavi.
You're drinking
the Cab Sauv?
Yeah, Cab.
I'm drinking water and coffee, and I like my coffee like I like my women. Blonde, thick, and sweet.
There you
See,
go.
I like my coffee like I like my men. Black.
Oh.
What is today's topic, Cory?
Well, Jonathan's the topic proposer today. So, Jonathan, why don't you tell us what's going on here?
So I went through this Lent, right? And I was told to read this book, the Latter Ascent book, but and very much like with other saint books I've read, I find the guy very unimpressive. And I want to talk about why I think a life of privation, a life without sin, a life, the monastic life, is for the weak ones. This is just my opinion. I have no theology behind this. This is just 40 years of sinning. And I want to discuss why that we revere people who have never experienced the taste of pure physical sensation and then claim they're saints when they've never. It's like, how can you call yourself a saint when you've never been a sinner, not a real sinner?
Sorry, can I say something?
Go ahead.
I want to go ahead and say that I actually think a lot of the church fathers would agree with you here.
How come none of them? I mean, I don't know of any saint. You might know one that.
Well, I mean, already in the Bible, right? Paul says that through great sin, the grace of God abounds all the more. And there is this understanding that you see in the patristics that it's the greatest sinners who become the greatest saints. And they would say the path of the person who is just born into a very pious family, happens to have the grace of a nature that is very pious, becomes a monk. They are living the easy, straightforward life. And the thing that is, I think you would still criticize about Christianity within this vein is that it's very democratic because it says this person can easily attain sainthood, right? Well, not easily, but compared to the great sinner, let's say. The much more intense path is being someone like St. Mary of Egypt or the prodigal son who goes entire left hand and, just breaks every taboo, becomes a demon worshiper like Saint, he was a great sage, a great magician. I can't remember at the moment, but he made a deal with the devil and then later renounced the devil, became a Christian. In either case, you have these saints who are like huge occultists, huge sinners, whores, drug addicts. They become sort of the greatest saints. Now, right, so it's still working within this democratic idea, though I think you'll criticize. But it is this idea that the energy or eros that goes to the left is all the more powerful because it boomerangs back.
Well, it's like the story of the prodigal son. I'm glad you brought that up. Anybody who reads that story, like let's say that story had a sequel, from the first part, the original part, who the good guy is and who the bad guy is. The bad guy is the brother that stayed.
Yeah.
That's obvious from the language he uses.
Right.
The good guy is the one that comes back.
Yeah.
And for me as a child hearing that story, that's what that story means, is you're supposed to leave. You're supposed to wallow with the pigs, right? You're not supposed to stay home. Like, it's not impressive. You stayed home with daddy in a nice little cushy warm bed, never did anything wrong. That's why daddy's not impressed with you in the end.
Yeah.
And I think that like Catharism, that's one thing I told you earlier, I'm kind of attracted to Gnosticism in this regard, is because they believe that you sin your little heart away until you could be perfect. And to me, that makes sense. And I've said this all the time, and maybe this is terrible to say on this podcast of Orthodox leaning, but just I'm not impressed with your life unless you snorted cocaine off a woman's breast while you're having sex with her and then turned away from that life. Unless you know pure sensation, unless you know the ecstasy, because the life of sin is very exclusive. People don't realize this.
Yeah.
It's not democratic. Okay. You can't walk into a party and expect to do something like that.
Yeah.
You can't walk into a party and expect to have a threesome or some kind of crazy sinful activity. It's very exclusive. And often you have to work at it to get there. So to me, to work for something, because I mean, that's what I did in my past, is that you were worked up with this life of sin, so you get to the upper echelon of sin where you're doing things that you can't even fathom. And then to turn away from that, to me, is more impressive than to never experience it at all. And this has always been my criticism with Jesus. Like, I get it, he's a son of God, and that's kind of a caveat there because he knows who he is. But still, like, you never been with a woman, You trying to tell me about sin, bro?
Yeah.
I mean, like, I just, it's just a personal thing, I guess. But so some people, like my brother did not meet his wife and have 2 kids. He would have no problem whatsoever living in a monastery his whole life and never speaking to another human. I think some people, you know, going to Jung's personality types, some people are just geared for that.
Yeah.
And that's the best. That's a great, you know, that's awesome.
Yeah.
But someone like me is not at all. I need people, you know, I need sin to a degree. And that's why, like, you know, my brother was like, during the Lent, I got married. I didn't drink the whole Lent. But the night I got married, you boys were there.
Yeah.
I drank.
Yeah.
I was to the point where like my legs didn't work, but I was still articulate as hell.
Yeah, there are people carrying you out. It was pretty funny.
It's like with Socrates. It starts with the legs and works its way up to the mind. You know?
Yeah. But I don't know. That's just something I've always bothered me, not just about Orthodoxy, but about especially Protestantism, the whole thing. Like, one thing I always appreciated about growing up in a Pentecostal church is that the sin was anticipated. It was like, yeah, this person's, they just, you know, they born again speaking in tongues. Yeah. And you assume in a month they're going to go back drinking and whoring around. And then they'll come back again. And I guess that's how I was raised to, maybe, but I don't know. But I've never, it's, to me, reading these books, Evagrius, all these guys, it's just, I don't care about your spiritual life. I don't care. Like, you have nothing to say. Like, to me, it's just, your worst thing you did was was fast. It's the hardest thing you've done. Have you ever come off heroin, bro? I mean, like, that's the hardest thing you've done. You tell me about God. You talk to me about spirituality. Like, and like I said, this is not, I've never read anything that says this is how it should be. Never. This is just Jonathan's fucking experience of life. I know it's heretical to say all this, but like, it's just,
I don't think it's heretical.
Let me hear your opinion. I'm just shut up.
I think a lot of Orthodox would agree. And again, I actually want to kind of go, the only thing I want to go against what you're saying is where you say the Protestants are the ones who get this right. Because I actually think the Protestants are the one who fuck this up. Generally speaking, Pentecostals might be better here, but if you look at the, not American, but the actual European Catholic and Orthodox cultures, especially Eastern Europe, Romania, Italy, France, Spain, it's cultures that are all about indulgence, especially Italians. They know how to have a good time.
Sure. Wait, I think he said that Protestants fucking up the most.
Yes.
Oh.
I'm saying this is where Catholics and Orthodox get it right, but you don't see this culture in America. Why? Because even the Orthodox and the Catholics in America are Protestants. At this point, since everyone's American, even the Orthodox and Catholics in the old world are basically Protestant at this point. But traditionally, it's a culture that's all about celebration of life, of joie de vivre. Even France has this long celebrated history of having a mistress on the side. You know, that's just a part of their culture. And really, honestly, I don't think polygamy is ever actually condemned in the scripture. It's kind of just something that we impose from the Roman Empire. And you see all these saints even after the New Testament, like Saint Stephan of Romania, who is basically a polygamist, right? So, but there's very much this culture of indulgence. And something that is that indulgence or taking God's graces through being the pig, basically the path of the pig, and still being able to balance that with this religious piety. And whether you do that on one side and then go to the other, or you do both simultaneously, right? That's where your personality type. And then there's a few who just go totally right hand and just go become monks or live very stoic lives, right? But that's the exception. I think when you get into Protestantism, especially like the Puritanism that sort of founds the American culture, that's where you really start to fuck up, because that's where you get this idea that there's no meaning whatsoever in this pleasure. It's the exact opposite of the wisdom of Ecclesiastes. Ecclesiastes says the only thing that exists is God's law. Everything else is permitted. Do what thou wilt. Have a party, be married, have women, have lots of money. It's not going to bring you any lasting happiness. And that's exactly why you're going to end up turning to God in the end. So it doesn't matter, party, have fun, whatever. That's the meaning of Ecclesiastes. Protestants turn that on its head. I mean, my favorite Protestant, Brian Ketterer, he really goes the whole way, because he goes to the extent that he says that Ecclesiastes is totally heretical. It's not even a part of the Bible, right? And I think that's consistent with being a real Protestant, a real Tertullian type person. So I think actual Christian culture is all about this. Now, given that, in the sort of hagiographical literature that you're going to generally read in Christianity, you're not going to get that path. You might get it in Lives of the Saints, like St. Mary of Egypt, right? but it's not something that's going to be celebrated or embraced. That's something that's going to be exuded much more passively in the culture.
Yeah. Well, it's just I don't know this much about the saints. I know the ones,
Mm-hmm.
I know Augustine was a sinner for a little bit, then he wasn't. I don't think Gregory was ever a sinner, right?
Gregory,
Nyssa.
no, he was pretty much. I mean, maybe in his early life, but yeah. So.
Origen wasn't a sinner.
No, Origen was pretty
He
chaste.
cut his own balls off.
Yeah, he was pretty stoic his whole life. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. Like all the big boys,
Mm-hmm.
Pseudo Dionysius.
Yeah, most of the theologians are pretty straight laced.
And
when you go in the West, it's a different story. You get some fun ones in the West, but yeah, in the East, they're pretty stoic. They're all pretty ascetic their whole lives.
Well, go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, I think for them, they do talk about sin, but they're more known for just some of their straight up theology, not so much it's like spirituality.
But they're not like these rock star theologians in the West. Like, who's that one who was castrated because he slept with a woman? He has a really cool name. Oh, why can't I not remember? I'm bad on names today. I can't remember the sorcerer guy either. But he was a party boy and he lived this crazy life. He seduced this girl and Abelard. There we go. He's not a saint, but he's off. He was foundational to a lot of medieval theology and philosophy. But he was very much a party boy. Or Kierkegaard, a great Protestant thinker, who came to his realization basically after he was the life of a party and then realized just how meaningless he felt doing that, and basically dedicated his life to theology and philosophy after that. Abelard's the one who comes closest to like the one who is doing both at the same time, I think, though.
Well, I think it's part of this. So much of this is how I am. I remember when I read about Manichaeism, I'm like, oh, that sounds brilliant. I mean, just send away. And that's how I lived probably from ages 15 to till I had a kid, 30. I lived this life. It was like, I'll do anything. This sounds interesting to me.
Yeah.
I pretty much did every sin in the book except homosexuality, just because it didn't sound interesting to me. That was the only reason why. I would have done it if I thought it sounded, to me, kissing a guy, it's not eating shit. So I just never, I was not wired like that. So but had I been wired like that, I had no problem doing that either. I was just down to do whatever sin I could. And today at 40, I still have my little sinning. It's like I almost need it. It's like, I go and say, so for example, I have this thing where like once a month I get trashed. Sometimes cocaine's involved. I get wild.
Yeah.
Once a month. My wife knows. She's cool with it because I don't cheat on her or anything, but she knows that every now and then I've just got to go through the gamut, just push on through. She'll see me when she gets up in the morning outside in the back patio with my buddy Tom. Like she'll see it and she'll be like, it's that time of the month again. There's Jonathan. But I feel like I need it because I feel like my spiritual quest goes dry without it.
Yeah, no, I think that's totally normal.
You think so?
Well, normal in the sense like it's I think for much of Christian history that was normal. Even the norm in the sense that's how most people were. Most Europeans definitely were. I think in America we're so Protestantized we forgot. Or I will say the way we party is so lame. This is kind of why I do symposiums. It's kind of like both Apollonian and Dionysian. But our party culture isn't interesting. The Europeans had a wonderful party culture. The Aztecs. Yeah, the Aztecs had a wonderful party culture, right? Just
the Aztecs?
Sacrificing someone.
Woo!
Yeah. The Romans, burning Christians alive for your lanterns. Like most cultures had wonderful ways to party that Americans just the same way our sports are so lame now, right?
I will say at our last party, Corey, we very nearly burned you at the stake. we had him tied up.
Well, we know
in the
how
fire,
to throw
ready
parties,
go.
right? We're not most Americans,
you and I get
but our parties are reactionary to American parties, definitely. But
see, that's interesting you say that because I felt like I've always, even non-atheists that I work with are like, what the fuck is wrong with you, bro? You got 4 kids at home and you call yourself religious? You was up till 10 a.m. Drinking bourbon with your buddy Tom. Like, how is this? How are you?
Yeah.
How can you claim you're religious?
Our atheists are the pious Christians. That's what Sterner says, right?
I didn't know that.
That's what, and Nietzsche kind of copies that too. But no, exactly. Even our atheists are Protestants here. They're goody two shoes. I mean, you talk to any secular liberal, even someone on the right who's an atheist. Most of where they understand their morality has nothing to do with paganism. It's Christian through and through.
Yeah.
Even their ideas of how one should enjoy themselves are Christian, in the worst sense of that word, in the Nietzschean sense of Christian.
I think the whole idea of love is strictly from that.
Yeah,
all
definitely.
That stuff is. It's all. It's And I was talking to this I had a drink with this. She's a teacher. She's a big, atheist, big progressive girl. And we were discussing this, and I was explaining to her, like, all these things you're saying, sound like a Protestant version of Jesus, acceptance, love, tolerance. But in my mind, the most powerful Jesus is the one that comes with a sword.
Yeah.
And that's how I see it, even in my own life, like as you cut away.
Yeah.
You cut away the dead wood. You cut away you don't tolerate which shouldn't be there or what's wrong. And that's how I treat my own life. And I think that's what happens. Like when I get drunk, I get hammered, like the next day, usually week, I think about all the stupid stuff I did and what was the problem at the beginning that caused me to do that, or I was, it's whatever, it's almost Freudian in a weird way. Like what's the deeper issue here? And I thoroughly enjoy it.
Yeah.
Like the best journal entries come hung over the day after one of my big sprees. It's one of the best, most profound journal entries I write. I have a book I write for my kids because I don't think I'm gonna live that long. I have a weird feeling I'll probably make it to maybe 60, maybe. But so I've been writing this book, and it's like things that I've learned in life. It gets the most interest on the hangover days.
Yeah, you need Dionysius to give birth to Apollo.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Yeah,
you have to indulge to have knowledge of the self.
But
I mean, Socrates outdrinked anyone,
Yeah, no, that's true. That's a good point. I don't know. I feel like that. I don't get this vibe. Okay, so we were at your the Lent celebration after that at 3 a.m. At the
Pascha.
Oh, Pascha. Yeah.
Which, by the way, makes for a hell of a story, and it's just that's what I live for: is stories in life. Like that's why I went hunting. Like I just want to hear. I want to have the big stories. That's all I care about. Stories. Like I feel like what's a life if it's not a story? But that at the end of it, the priest cut it off because one guy, I guess he went to a monastery. I don't know. Was like I was saying something like this, and he was like, "No, you don't know the hell that we go through spiritually in a monastery." And I'm sure that's true. But you don't know the hell that you go through some crazy physical sinning. I mean, like
But there are monks who have been through that too.
I'm sure they have. Like, I'm not knocking either way because I think it's just a matter of how you are,
right?
Your personality. Like,
yeah.
Like I think that it is impressive, I guess, if you're able to sit in the monastery and not ever do anything. But I think for that personality type, I mean, that would be some kind of introverted, sensation. Or not lack of sensation. I don't know what you are.
Yeah.
But for me, like it doesn't make sense. It's not. It's this. Even Paul never really made sense to me. I mean, what was his big sin? Killing people. I mean,
I don't know. Yeah, his thorn in the flesh, whatever that means.
Yeah, I mean, it's just not impressive, bro. Like,
yeah, Paul's very stoic, kind of annoying at times in a good way, but yeah. No, I mean, you're very much more like the warrior type, like St. George or someone, just killing a dragon and saving a damsel in damsel in distress, rather. Damsel in express.
I was gonna ask something. You said you're not impressed with Jesus because he never really sinned. So, but one thing that the one that always caught me when I was even young was at church. He would always talk about how he made the greatest sacrifice that no one else could make. He sacrificed himself to save everyone else who's ever gonna exist. And I always thought, even when I was young, I would have done that.
Yes.
Pretty much everyone I know, you would have to be such a shitty person to have God come and say, hey, if you die, everyone else can be saved, and you say no?
I couldn't agree more with this.
Okay.
I couldn't agree more.
I think any person of common sense thinks that's bullshit.
So what do you make of that? What do you
I don't
do
think
with
that's I don't think
that?
that's no church father argues for Christianity from that point of view. That is a totally modern approach to it.
Okay.
Yeah, that's just shitty theology.
That's just bad theology, yeah. I mean,
is that a very American idea?
I think so, but I will say, even before Americanism, Calvinists did take this idea to its logical conclusion, which was to say that there is not all Calvinists think this. This is a fringe minority of Dutch Calvinism, and the Dutch are insane. And, Van Gogh was Dutch, right? Anyway, these Calvinists think that there's a part of Christ's person or nature always in hell, eternally burning. Because the only way he could pay for God's anger for him on the cross would be to suffer the actual sins of all man, which is not merely dying for 3 days, but actually suffering in hell for eternity.
Okay.
Therefore, a part of Christ is constantly suffering in hell for eternity.
I like that more because, I mean,
No, it makes
hell,
more
I'm
sense.
sure, is horrible, but 3 days, that seems like a really stupid deal by the devil to make with God.
I like Calvin how you said I'm not gonna have a microphone because I don't have much to say. And then the one comment you ran across the room for is like, you know what? Actually, this Jesus guy got some problems with too. Let me get on the mic and say something.
I've just never been in a setting where people are religious, but also are like, hey, this doesn't quite make sense. Parts of this, or
Yeah, I
it's
mean-
not impressive, as you said.
There's
Impressive.
probably something in every prophet where this is true. You know, Buddha, Muhammad, maybe not so much Muhammad, but Buddha or Jesus for sure. But there's something in there for everyone. If you're a warrior, if you're a seducer, if you're a ascetic, if you're a womanizer or a gourmand, there's something that you can relate to the words of a prophet in there to find yourself in them, expressed in them, probably.
One thing I think about a lot. Recently, I read Rasputin's biography written by his daughter.
Oh, okay. I didn't know his daughter wrote one.
I was told it's the worst one because the author actually believes in the spiritual powers. So I was like, I got to read this one.
Look, the spiritual powers of Rasputin.
Yeah.
I mean, from an Orthodox point of view, yeah. Okay, it's like the dentist commercial. 4 out of 5 dentists recommend this toothpaste. It's like 4 out of 5 saints recommend Rasputin. The only guy who didn't like him was the emperor. The empress, the daughters, the son, they loved Rasputin. The son thought he was like the next Jesus, basically. Well, that guy definitely had powers.
Well, so the story is, this is the story that the grandmother, his mother, told the daughter, was that Rasputin was an animal healer and animal speaker as a child.
Yeah.
Which that's what they say Merlin was.
Yeah.
That was Merlin's main gifts, was with animals. And he watched his brother drown and his powers got muted. And only later they started to come back. But what I found interesting was why he told his daughter he's in the life he's in, is that he went to an Orthodox monastery because nobody knew what to do with him. Like, you have this kid with special powers. What do you do with him?
Right.
In Siberia, you send him to the Orthodox monastery. And he said that all these people did was talk about these pious lives.
Yeah.
And then go fuck each other.
Yeah.
And he was like, he's like, this made no sense to me. Not only it was a complete sham. And he said he understood the need for sin, but not the need for the hypocrisy of it.
Right.
Like, why put on this white shawl and then go take your brother in the back? Like, what's the point? And so that's kind of how, and he lives his life in cycles. It's like sin, not sin, sin, not sin. And his daughter says in the book that the night he gets killed, she thinks he's ready for it. He's ready to die. Not because he had made
he certainly resist it.
Well,
his body does at least.
Well, so she said that he made these comments that it was his life of sinning that got this way. But she doesn't think that's true. She thought it was the way he was abused for his power by everyone. It just destroyed his soul over time. And she talks about last night, the night he leaves to get killed, and he just looks like a haggard, destroyed man because someone else needs his healing powers, like someone else. And he's just like, and she just thinks it's wiping the power out of him every time he does it. But I just thought that was an interesting take that, that Orthodoxy teach piety but they don't have a problem with hypocrisy. And that's kind of, that was his justification. And he's a very pious man in a really weird way. Very, very pious.
I think
man.
he is. Yeah.
I mean, but just in the sense of like me.
This reminds me of what G.K. Chesterton said, because he was Anglican, but he became Catholic. And he said the reason he gave up on Protestantism was because if he went to a Protestant church, if he left his umbrella in the umbrella casket or whatever, he always knew it was going to be there when it came back. But if he went to a Catholic church, he had to keep his umbrella with him or it gets stolen. And he said, you can only do this in a confessional culture. Like, no one's bullshitting you. Like, it's not this pretend game. I mean, don't get me wrong. It happens all the time with Orthodox and Catholics. But it's definitely a culture that's much more open to that overtness. Versus, I think the Baptists are the easy target here. It's like, we don't drink, but you always go there and under Dad's cupboard, there's like some whiskey or something,
I mean, I think also that, well, it's I know so many people growing up who are Protestants, a lot of them strict Protestants. I could tell you some horror stories. I don't want to out these people, but and what you'll notice is that they very often cheat on their spouses and they end up in divorce. Very often. Like, no matter how many
Protestants have one of the highest divorce rates of any group of people in the world.
I think that's fascinating.
It's over 50.
Also, sex scandals, they're higher than the Catholic Church.
You think so?
Statistically, this Catholic churches might be more blameworthy because they have a whole hierarchy that's there supposedly to prevent that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But
I was going to finish is that the people I know that have been successful in marriage, one of them is a devout Catholic, who is also an alcoholic, bourbon. He loves the bourbon, like, and then there's people like me, you know, who has wild times every now and then, and it's always the people that are a little crazy that seem to work out in marriage. It's never the people that try to walk the fine line of the Protestant faith. And I think the reason why Protestants, I'm sure you agree with this, the reason why they do that is because they believe that the earth is sin, the earth is evil. Like, you know, what's material is terrible. In general, they believe that.
Yeah.
You know? And so it's like the idea that you walk among the people, but not with their, you know, what's the quote from Jesus? You walk among the flesh, but you aren't of the flesh, or flip that around.
In the world, but not of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, theologically, Protestants would definitely say that the world or creation is good, but they definitely have this Gnostic underpinning that,
Very much
again,
so.
I think comes from Tertullian, that undergirds a lot of their actual existential everyday life.
Also, I think just going into a marriage with any idea that your spouse isn't going to sin is you're setting yourself up for failure. If they're, he's never going to drink, he's never going to do this, he's never going to do this because that's not Christian, then when they do, I think it becomes a much bigger issue for them. They aren't able to work it out because they're taught that that is just bad, it is evil and of the world and a fallen world. And so they kind of set themselves up for failure, kind of going into marriage with this idea that they're not going to sin, I think, at least in some of the people I know.
And again, I imagine if you intellectually ask them this question, they'll say, no, of course I don't think my spouse is, not going to sin. Of course I expect this, right? But again, it's the same thing with this theology versus existential difference. What is thought versus what is actually brought out in their lived life, their lived experience. I mean, the cultures produced by orthodoxy and Catholicism are built into sin. They expect, and Protestants will criticize these cultures precisely for this. Like, they love to critique confession because you can just sin however much you want and go to confession. I'm like, yes, that's why this produces great culture.
But they believe the same
Protestantism
thing.
doesn't. Protestantism produces lame capitalism.
But they believe the same thing. No, not to go to confession, but just to pray.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember.
But confessing to an abstract idea of God is very different than confessing to
True.
a person.
It's a very good point.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I remember as a child, this warped the shit out of me. My grandmother made us watch what's the name? Thief in the Night. It's like a 1970s extraordinarily Protestant, or maybe even Pentecostal, I don't know, but it's about the rapture, right?
Okay.
And it warped me to where when I was like, 12, 13 years old, every time I would masturbate, I would call 3 people I assumed were Christians, and I only would pick women because I never knew what a man would do, to make sure the rapture hadn't happened. And I would devoutly pray. Then I would call my aunt. I would call other people that I knew that, that probably weren't sinning, and just to make sure that. And this went on for years. And that warped so much of my mind, I'm sure.
Why 3?
I don't know. It was always
This came
3
to
though.
you?
It was like 1, they could be a sinner. 2, there's a chance that both of them are a sinner. 3, probably not a chance all 3 of them are a sinner.
Yeah.
That's kind of how my mind
I
was.
see.
Growing up in a Protestant church, I've actually met other people who did that.
Did they also do 3 people?
They never disclosed how many.
I
I know
see.
I never got called, so I don't know what that says.
I mean, I didn't trust any man, no matter who it was.
Wait, were you raised in a church that taught rapture?
We grew up in a very conservative Free Methodist church, and
But
they
Methodists don't believe in
didn't
rapture, do they?
exactly teach a rapture, but most of the people there were
Just
into
folk-
that sort of
folk
thing.
belief, I
It wasn't
see.
something that the guy giving the sermon every week talked
Right.
about, but everyone there was kind of collectively in on it.
I always thought the rapture was one of the weirdest thing Americans have ever produced.
Oh, it's wild.
Have you ever seen that Nicolas Cage movie about it?
Yeah.
It's a good. Movie.
That is like, it's kind of like Mormonism. It's pure American mythology. You do not see anything like the rapture. Even like the crazy Gnostics, like any of the weird church father fringe opinions, any of the Gnostics, it's like something uniquely produced by American culture. Like
when
Mormonism.
did it start to come about?
The 18th century, after the Great Awakening.
So it's very modern.
It's very modern.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
The ones who are somewhat theologically educated, who argue for the rapture, will try to point to like millenarian church fathers, which are few and far between. But even then, they're not talking about anything like the rapture. They're talking about Jesus literally coming and being the president of the world for like thousands of years, or 1,000 years, right? And even then, that was later condemned. But yeah, the rapture is very weird to me. I always thought that was, even beyond it's just being weird as a myth, it's very weird to me theologically. It doesn't seem Christian at all. It's just like, oh, we've been the good boys, so we get to be protected from the devil's wrath. But it's like, that's very much not the idea you get in the Old Testament or the New Testament. It's like, no, it's precisely the Christians who have to suffer.
I mean,
if you want an easy life, be a not even a particularly egregious sinner, like a well put together rich person who takes advantage of other people. That is the lesson of the Old Testament. If you want an easy life, be corrupt, rich, but a very balanced person in control of their passions. A Roman, basically.
You know, kind of bringing this back to some what we were talking about, especially with monasticism. I've had a similar critique, and I'm not sure how I want to formulate, my thoughts here, because I don't really know what I think. But just from my experience, I went to a seminary for a while, and my initial idea was to become a priest, and the number of reasons why I didn't go that route. But one thing that was a struggle there was this kind of, and I don't want to call it false piety, but there was this
The piety Olympics.
Yeah, it is. Well, there's that. This performative piety all the time. And that's not to say there isn't true piety there. There was, but I have, Jonathan, what you're saying, I had a similar experience. I never done well with pious people. I've never done well with I'm not to say, again, it's define pious. I like the pure, the pure people who are kind of afraid of sin, the people who could clutch their pearls. I was so unimpressed, and I felt I never related to them, and they never were spiritually inspiring in any way. And Cory and I went to a monastery recently, and really nice monastery, really lovely people there who I respect. But every time I go to a monastery, I always get creeped out, and I don't, and that's not to say anything necessarily on them, or maybe a bit. It's like, I feel like if I can't say the word fuck to you, I just don't trust you. If that's a spiritual concern, or if that's a something that's going to scandalize you, if that's going to I need to be able to say something. I mean, for one thing, fuck's not that scandalous, but if you can't say that, I'm I can't have a conversation with you about piety or spirituality. And again, I don't really know how to formulate this, but I've always found those people spiritually uninspiring. And I had a dream, recently. There's this particular individual I know who had some kind of some sort of radical beliefs that would scandalize some people, which I actually don't think are that radical.
That's most of our friends.
Once you get once you get talking to them, but to the average American is a little bit scandalous. And I know this person had some trouble with his church, because people at the church would know about this, and they
lots of gossiping.
They'd get gossipy and not really happy to have him around, and all this stuff. And but he's one of those people who we don't talk that much, but when we talk about God or religion, I really respect him, so deeply. And
he's very genuine.
And I had a dream the other day about him, where there was the icon of the Virgin Mary, the Theotokos, was on the ground, and this person's an artist as well in his life. And in the dream, he was putting glass in his feet over the icon and bleeding on the icon with his foot on the icon on the ground. And I went up to him and I'm like, oh, this is interesting. And he was taking pictures of it. It was some sort of art piece. And he said, most people I know would think I'm just being sacrilegious right now. He said, but there's meaning to what I'm doing. And it was something kind of about martyrdom and pain and faith. And I don't remember what he said in the dream, but I said, no, bro, I get what you're doing. It does seem really sacrilegious, at its heart, but I get what you're doing. And I was reflecting on this dream, and I thought what I really admire, and I disagree with him on a lot of things. And what I admire about his faith is there's nothing in it that is meant to be performative or meant to be impressive. And there's something with people of faith in general. It's you go to church because that's what good people do. Even if you mean it, even if you believe it, it's good people go to church, good people pray, good people don't sin. So there's a part of faith which is just to be impressive, even if it's only impressive to yourself. Whereas someone like this guy who is so uninterested in being impressive to other people, to the point that he will even say things to scandalize people so they don't think he's one of the normal, impressive people. The fact that he will still be very serious about faith and have this relation with God, it's almost a burden. It's almost something he doesn't want, but has to have. And that's someone I can talk to about religion. That's someone who I'm that is a real faith. And it's so hard, I think, in Christianity to get away from people who are at least on some level being performative. So I don't know. I guess that's sort of my take on that.
Yeah, I mean, it's performance all the way down. I don't think you escape the mask.
That's true.
If Jesus was anything, it's the one person who wasn't wearing a mask.
Mhm.
If he was anything at all, right? Otherwise, all this is pointless. But it's a question too of like, because you can also have the fool for Christ who's on 3 levels, the one who's
Right.
playing up the piety Olympics, so that people, he's like 2 steps ahead of you, right? I think those people exist too.
But see, coming from my view, my ridiculous, crazy, stupid life, I never respected those people. Like the people that play the piety game.
But like because they want the social credit.
Yeah, because I don't think that the credit they get's what they want. And just this is gonna sound terrible, but it's just what I've noticed in my life is that being the bad boy works for you in almost every way. It does. I watched this stupid YouTube video. It was recommended to me. I was watching a Ken Wheeler video, and this came up, and it was this guy used to be a kickboxer, and he's this ultra masculine dude, but he had this really good point. It's like if you want a relationship with your friends and your wife to work, you just got to stay a little wild. And it was a stupid point, but it's true. Like if you're just who you are and you don't, everybody gives a shit to a certain extent, but just you fuck up every now and then. Like I've messed up so many times, but I think the reason why she's so happy with me is because I tell her when I mess up, like, look, I was hammered last night, what happened? And because I'm a little wild. There's been she's never conquered the tiger, and that's why I think pious people to me have always come off as weak and fake. And I don't think they get the social credit to which they are after. They seek,
yeah. And at the end of the day, they're not really pleasing other people. They're trying to please some weird super ego neuroticism in themselves.
Sure. Yeah.
But
isn't that other people though? Isn't super ego other people?
Well, the super ego is what you think is other people. That's actually something inside of you that you've interjected, right? But in the sense, like consciously, they're like not even aware that they're probably not really aware that they're trying to impress other people. That's their deeper motive. But beneath that motive is actually this interior, this part of themselves that they're trying to impress.
It's like
usually because there's some deep-seated guilt or something.
It comes across as just self-conscious. And
as what?
Self-conscious people who are trying to be pious.
Do you mean lacking self-conscious? What do you mean?
No, that these people are like self-conscious and they're needing some sort of approval or validation, even if it's like just from themselves. That they're like afraid to sin. It's like the people who I would get along with are the people who like during the fast, would eat a big pizza and get drunk and then go to church the next day. And it's like, who would fuck up and not deny that they fucked up, but it doesn't really mean anything. Like it is the prodigal son. It's like, yeah, and then I'll go up and go to church, and it's like, okay, so you're not going to church because you're supposed to. You're going to church because it means something to you, because you're willing to fuck up. You're willing to completely break the fast, or something like that. So then it's like, well, then you're still going to church, so it still means something. I mean, I guess it could, you could do it in a bad way where it's like, well, I need to go repent, but those are people I could have more, better conversation with and trust more. It'd be interesting. I had kind of wanted Simeon from the last podcast to make it on, which he's very hard to get to commit, because he would probably take this in an interesting way. He shares a similar, not the same, a similar critique of you. He's very critical of Christian monasticism. He thinks it's weak. He thinks it's lame. He thinks it's a cop out.
From a Muslim perspective.
But he himself is devout Muslim, never touched alcohol. He's also French, so he has a French attitude, right? But he's very piously Muslim in following, his Muslim rules. And, I know for him, like he won't do other substances. And I think for him, it's because he's kind of afraid that it'll kind of interfere with the spiritual, realm, to kind of get too involved with other substances. So in many ways, he's living that kind of, pious life. He's a very pious person, very monastic in his life. But I was asking why he's so critical, despite that, so critical of monastics. And he always thought it was like, running away. I mean, his whole thing, and we talked about this on the last podcast a little bit, I wish we had talked about more, is like killing the ego, right? Killing desire. And he's like, you can't do that until you've like experienced the desire thing. Like he thinks it's kind of I don't want to put words in his mouth. Based on conversations, like he thinks it's a cop out to not get married and have kids because he's like, those are like objects of desire. You have to get married, you have to have children, you have to have things that you desire in order to truly kill desire and to kill the ego. And if you just run off to a monastery and are avoidant, then you've never actually faced desire. You've never actually faced these obstacles, and then you can't really truly kill them. I think that's an interesting perspective, because he certainly wouldn't say you should live a life of sin.
I mean, I don't disagree with him. I just think there's multiple paths, and it's also just a bit of a naive idea about what monasteries are even supposed to be.
Yeah, I disagree with him on this,
because
I just think it's an interesting perspective.
Any good monastic abbot will tell you that one of the main things he looks for before he lets someone into a monastery is to make sure they're not running away from something.
Yeah.
He wants you to hone in and run into something in a monastery. A monastery is another sort of marriage.
Right.
And what a lot of people don't understand is that your psychology entirely changes when you undergo intense long-term asceticism, and desires you were never even aware of start to come out.
I know that's true.
Sorry?
No, I have no doubt that's
Yeah.
true.
Desires that you're not even aware of start to come out that you've never battled with. They're totally new demons.
But if you're in a monastery, you can't act on those desires.
You can't, but the thing in a monastery is that your thoughts become so real. They become physiological. They become, you start to lose, I mean, you can go insane. You start to lose this distinction between, it's kind of reminds me of this kid I knew in middle school who played a lot of video games. And when he was like, at school, he would act out the video games he was playing. Like he couldn't distinguish between the video game and reality. Your desires become that in, kind of like in psychoanalysis. They become manifest in that way in monastic life.
Yeah, and I'm afraid I'm going to listen to this podcast so that not like the path of the things I said, because I don't want to come out like against monasteries myself or against monastics myself. I actually have a lot of respect for monastics, but in a certain way, and I think it's easy to do it in a poor way. My spiritual father was a monk, or is a monk, who I love deeply. One of my examples of faith, but he was also the guy who made no show of being pious. He was very pious, but he also would he would be very clear about his sin. I mean, he would be like, oh, fuck this guy. I mean, he would say that, and he made no illusions about it. And but he wouldn't say, oh, that's fine to say. He's like, yeah, I'm a sinner. I think there is, and I think this is something that, and I don't agree with Simeon on his opinion, but I think there is the way of the hermit,
Yes.
And I think that I do think I think what you said about the abbot's true, because there are people who want to go to monasteries because they're running away. And I think it's good that, you don't just hate them because they're running away. But yeah, I think there is the way of the hermit. And I think there is the way of you deny all the passions and all the pleasures, because it's going to give you a certain spiritual revelation. But I certainly don't think that's everyone's path at all.
I think I'm not trying to knock it. I think there's a path of the hermit. Like I said, you're born that way, and it's impressive to the people that are born that way. I'm not knocking it. I'm just saying, for me, who is absolutely 100% not born that way, it's not impressive. But I think that's natural. And you said about spiritual fathers. Like, this might sound so crazy to you all, or maybe it sounds a little normal. My spiritual father is this weird being that's been in my head since I was a child. I talk to him all the time.
Mm-hmm.
It might be God. I have no idea.
It's your daemon.
He looks like the Silver Surfer. I'm dead serious. Or you could say maybe a tint of the blue guy from the
blue guy
Watchmen.
Oh, yes.
It's something like that. But
what's his name?
I don't know. But I talked to him for years, and he tells me when I fucked up.
Dr. Manhattan.
Yeah, he tells me when I did something right. And honestly,
that's just like what Socrates says about his day.
He's not that harsh on me when I sin. Honestly.
Yeah.
He's much more harsh on me when I put on a show of something, or if I'm fake about something. But he's not. Every night we meet in the rain at the bottom of a mountain, and I go to bed, and we talk, and it's dark, and we talk until we get to the top of the mountain where it's light. It's always raining until we get to the top of the mountain. Do this every single night. I've had since I was a child, and that is my spiritual father. Mm-hmm. That's who I go to for advice. As crazy and absolutely schizo as that sounds.
No, I think that's very normal. I think every culture has, or spiritual system has, developed an exercise like that, and in the morning and at night, oftentimes.
Yeah, I used to do it in the morning too, because I would climb down the mountain.
You found a creative way to implement it yourself.
It's weird. It's just, but I think at the end of the day, what this comes down to for me, and this is a personal bias, So I work with a lot of wealthy people. My whole life I kind of have, and I've realized that no matter what race you are, no matter what social status you are, everyone likes one kind of person the most, or appreciates one kind of person the most. That's a person with stories.
Mhm.
Now, that's before, but like I'm telling you, it is the most effective way. I'm in a Toastmaster group. I've been in for 5 years. We practice public speaking. The speeches that kick the most ass are a story, whether it's a myth
Mhm.
or it's just a Jonathan story. It's a story. Everybody loves a story. So I feel like your life should be a story.
Mhm.
It should be an adventure. It should be, that's how I try to live my life. I try to find every opening I can to have an adventure of any kind, whether it's sinful or not. Have an adventure, have something to tell your kids, have something that goes down the line of your ancestors, of this crazy guy did. And I think, and I'm sure in a monastic life, you could tell some crazy stories, but it's just not the kind of stories that I'm built for.
Right.
And so I think that's, yeah.
I will say, from a purely hedonistic point of view, monasteries, they produce the best wine and beer, and I mean, we need them for that alone. And they preserve all the nice manuscripts and all that good stuff.
Plus, I think they cater to a very specific, like I said, type
Mhm.
of personality.
Yeah.
Like the hermit who does a lot of great work for people like us that are not hermits. We
Right.
have these books to read, like you said. We have all this great stuff. But probably the only reason why we have any even hermetic knowledge is because of these guys. I
Mhm.
mean, of course, we have a lot of respect for them. It's just not me.
Right.
Yeah, and I think we need to do a better job of understanding, and I do think it's more of a problem of Western post-Protestant culture, but I think we do need to have a better because I don't think you see this in more traditional in more in like you were saying. I don't know if you're saying it before or after the podcast, but in places like kind of the old France, old Italy, or many Orthodox countries. But it's like this notion of this sort of like cookie cutter, like the monk is like what we should all aspire to be. It's like the perfectly pious, the guy who doesn't sin, and that's the best person to be, and it's really not. I mean, I think what you said at the beginning about the prodigal son is really true. I think for most people, you need to go out, you need to leave the father's house, and you need to see the world in order to actually love the father, because the other brother, he never truly loved the father. He followed the father, but the prodigal son didn't actually learn what love for the father was until he didn't have the father.
I mean, even especially in Western Catholicism, some people became monks because it was a very hedonistic life. I mean, that's part of what caused the French Revolution.
Have you ever read The Devil of Loudon? Loudon?
No,
The Devil of Loudon?
I've heard of it. I haven't read
Huxley? Bro. Whoa. Like, according to Huxley, like this is back, 1400s?
it. Uh-huh.
People would get into the priesthood to climb social status.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
And what they would do is they would just sleep with all the widows.
Yeah.
And that's all they did. And it was almost like a part of their job as the priest of this village was to make sure all the widows were sexually satisfied.
Yeah.
It is a wild story.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, the Catholic Church has had human psychology down for a long time very well. That now the mass media is starting to learn from on a much bigger scale than the Catholic Church could have ever imagined.
Go ahead.
We're basically there. I don't know. Jonathan, did you have any last points?
It's not related. But
Go ahead. It's
I
fine.
have a weird question.
Mhm.
So I have this theory that in the next couple of years, financially, the world's going to go to shit.
Uh-huh.
This is not esoteric. This is just look at the numbers.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
So I was trying to think what's the best way to protect my family. And I came up with two options. One is to get involved in the Mormon church,
Uh-huh.
and one is get involved in the Masons. 'Cause I don't
Yeah.
think any other groups can financially sustain
Amish.
there's, I don't know of any Amish. I know of a route into both of those groups.
Uh-huh.
I don't know a route into the Amish.
Yeah, that one's pretty radical.
Honestly, or Scientology. That would probably work too. But they're
Yeah,
all
that's a
groups
lot of money.
that have a lot of money, though, that if something happens to one of their members, they will protect that group's family.
Uh-huh.
So I'm asking you, which route would you take?
I would probably go Mormon.
That's what I was thinking too.
I mean, really, I think one thing to do is learn how to cook, learn how to grow food, get guns.
yeah.
I think those three are the first things people need to do.
Well, I'm not. I'll be fine. Like our family will be
What?
fine.
Freeze dry, yeah. Pickle.
I think my family will be fine if I'm alive. What I'm worried about is if I die and I'm left, Jessica's left with all these kids. That's what I'm worried about. Like, because I don't think any other church, and granted, I love the Orthodox Church, the Catholic, they don't have the means or the system to set up to financially support completely a widow with some kids.
Yeah.
And I think that what the Mormons 100% will and do and have, and that's their thing. They have 3 years of food each. You know, I mean, they all.
I would go Mormon. Yeah.
But
I mean, also they have all these people in the FBI and CIA. They're in charge of like the Wisconsin cheese caves or whatever. I mean, you'll be set up. You know the Wisconsin cheese caves, or not Wisconsin? It's somewhere in the Midwest, but you know, America produced like I think.
Yeah, if it's cheese, it's Wisconsin.
Maybe, but it's somewhere in the Midwest. It might not actually be Wisconsin, but it's this huge underground facility. Because like only like 10% of the cheese that you see that America puts on the shelf that's like 10% of the cheese we produce every year.
By the way, Simeon, being French, says that any cheese that comes out of America is not true cheese.
Fair enough. We have this milk-based product that's yellow that we just have tons of it. Like we do not consume nearly enough. And so, but we don't want to just throw it away. So we have this giant facility underground. You look it up, just Google cheese caves. Anyone listening to this, you'll find it. And it's just a giant storage facility of, you know, hundreds of years of supplies of cheese. So I'm sure the Mormons have connections there.
Oh, I told you about the ancestry thing, right? Did I tell you about that?
Missouri, there it is. Yep. So the ancestry thing.
So my wife's mother's like second cousin husband is a big person in the Mormon church.
Mm-hmm.
And they have a whole database with world ancestry, whole database. And so she was joking, like she was like, "Let's run." And you can go to Salt Lake City into some underground facility and do it yourself. Anybody can, but to get it online, you have to have connections to the church. So they take it very seriously because her mom won't even give me the password. But so her mom looked up Jessica's family line. She comes from William the Conqueror.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, so do I. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's crazy. So then they did mine, and I didn't want to do it because I was like, no, because I can't match that. And Jessica's going to put this time out. You know, he's going to remind me of this every day. They did mine. I come out of it's Attila the Hun and the daughter of the Roman emperor who he married to.
Huh.
So I ended up coming through because that was Charlemagne's great claim to fame was that I came from Attila the Hun. Well, and through my ancestry thing, it goes through Charlemagne's sister. But what I find interesting is they have all that information. They got all that from the World Wars. When they went over to Europe, they collected all these databases and these records of where everyone is. And so it's just impressive that they have. They're just much more impressive than people realize.
Yeah. No, the Mormon church definitely has things down to a science.
Yeah.
They're pretty impressive.
You know, if you can trace your way back to William the Conqueror, and I think to Charlemagne too, because there's a tracing.
You can go back
there.
to Adam.
You can go back to Adam.
Yeah.
You can go back through Greek and Roman mythology, all the way up to the Titans, and you can go through Norse mythology, all the way up through to the primordial cow.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, if you're ever interested in that, I can actually, I did some of that research myself.
Really?
Yeah. So it's really interesting.
Well, see, with mine, she could go back farther. It was like, 60 pages, and she got to that one, and she thought that was super cool.
Yeah.
So she just stopped, but she was like, it could have kept going if you wanted to.
She could have gone to Adam. She really
think
could.
so?
Oh, well, I mean, I've done it myself because I
really?
traced back to William the Conqueror too.
Did you find the cheese caves?
Yeah. So you can get
That's
to,
crazy.
to Adam. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, you know, it's just when you get to that level of like these, you know, medieval or pre-medieval, you know, kings, they need to make sure they find a way to trace through the Trojans and through the Bible.
Yeah,
so,
the
you know,
Trojans.
of course, you don't take it seriously, but it's very interesting because you can trace it all the way back.
I always found that fascinating that the Roman emperors, one of the most important thing for them was to say they came out of Troy.
Yeah.
I always thought that was so
They
fascinating.
have to.
Yeah, have to.
Yeah.
I need to send you a really good YouTube video. That podcast it was actually someone commented on one of our podcasts and said, you need to listen to this guy. I'm trying to remember his name, but he talks a lot about Troy and just the mental gymnastics modern historians go through to say that this wasn't real when like every historian up until the 18th century said it was.
Yeah.
And why it's so important. Why does Dante spend so much time talking about Troy? Why is Troy so important, right?
We need to talk about that on our Atlantis podcast.
Yeah,
which
well,
we'll hopefully
Troy and
do soon.
Atlantis have a lot in common.
Yeah.
There's evidence that the way Troy was designed in terms of its city design, it was actually a planned city, was actually based off Atlantis. But that is definitely for the other podcast. I think we've reached the limit here.
Yeah, I do want to say, you know, to its credit, some of our biggest fans of the podcast are from our church. However, past episodes have ruffled a few feathers at our church that we've had to do
I think
some
people
cleanup
from
with.
our church will be totally fine with this one.
I can imagine there are a few people who are going to question some of the things
They'll
we
be
said in this
fine.
episode.
They'll be fine.
It's good for them. It's good for them. Yeah.
Oh yeah, compared to other stuff we said on other podcasts. No, what we've been saying is very like Alina, for example, would listen to this and be like, you know, just basically what I was saying, just like, yeah, Orthodoxy is totally aware of this. We're totally fine with this. We've integrated that into our
No,
culture.
yeah, there's that's what I said. There are definitely some people who are going to really love it, but I can know there's some people.
Someone got mad because I talked about Adam being a male and female, and they thought I meant that Adam was transgender or something.
That's Adam Cadmon. That's traditional.
Yeah,
Jewish text.
that the church. Some of the church fathers say this, but
Yeah.
they thought I meant that Adam. They thought I was playing like some LGBT queer narrative or something. I'm just like, no, that is not what I'm talking about. The LGBT narrative is antithetical to this idea.
Yeah.
But
I mean, that is. You ask any scholarly rabbi, they're going to say that Adam
Yeah.
Cadmon. That's the beginning. That's the one man. Yeah.
all right. Well, any closing comments?
Don't do what I do. I'm not recommending my way of life to anyone unless it's just happens to be that way. It's not like I say it's all been fun and games. It hasn't been. There's a lot of sorrow involved, a lot that wouldn't have been involved otherwise. I'm not recommending the life that I've led, especially to my own children. Jesus. But like I wouldn't recommend, you know what I'm saying? Like I'm not recommending this life of sin. I'm just simply saying from my perspective, this is what I've seen and this is what I've experienced in life. You know, that's all I would say.
I'm going to say two things. I'm going to say, do it or don't do it. You will regret it. And two,
True.
don't let the left hand know what the right hand doeth.
Yes, I like that.
All right. Until next time.